Awesome. Welcome. I'm really excited to be here. Thank you so much, Fluxty, for asking me to do this and doing the AMA. There's so many things I want to ask you. So I'm Jenny. They call me Jenny from the blockchain. And this is Adam, but we all know him as Fluxty. He is the game director for Good Gaming Inc. And he is here to tell us all about MicroBuddies and a little bit about his background and how he got into gaming and why he thinks that NFTs are going to be the coolest thing for gaming and blockchain. He's written lots of tweets about this and he has such great ideas. So I'm really excited to ask all of these questions, but it doesn't have to be all about me. This is Ask Me Anything. So we want you guys to ask the questions. If there's, feel free to, you can see the comments, right, Adam?
Yeah, of course.
Cool.
I've got the chat right here. I can see whatever you're seeing too.
Awesome. So just feel free to interrupt me at any time. And with that, we'll get started. So tell me, how did you get into developing and at what age? Because that's the cool
So I mean, people have heard this story. A few people have heard it. Shout out to Coach Nick Moneymaker. He said he's doing like a reaction stream, so I just wanted to shout him out before I get started. But so I got started with my gaming career. You can call it like at 12 years old. I was running a fan service for the children's game club Penguin. It ended up being the largest fan service that they had, and then they had some like pretty impressive numbers. Like we ran anywhere between 200,000 and 2 million monthly users. Like at our peak and for like a few years, I think. That game ended up getting really big and selling out to Disney. Where I got some connections there, pretty good time there. Fast forward a little bit older as I went through school. I built a computer science background. I learned like a lot of different programming languages, mainly Java, which is like, the thing Minecraft's coded in, which is how like that kind of segued. But also I took a lot of networking, like Cisco certifications and stuff like that. And from basically, from that point when I was 12 on, I was pretty much just all in gaming, doing stuff professionally in gaming, pretty much even now I'm still in gaming as a career, So one of the main things, I spent a few years like as I just call it a professional CSGO gambler, because I would bet on CSGO games, and I did pretty well there. The way that worked was like you would bet the items from CSGO, which is why I always bring up that. Sorry, just reading the chat. But I always bring up that the items in CSGO could have been like NFTs with like the royalties for Valve and stuff, because we would bet them on the games, and it was a very big market. And those skins, they ended up cracking down on it and like banning people and like not allowing anybody to continue doing that, and so that whole phase kind of ended. And so they're using this model now. That would have been really cool. But anyway, I started playing like semi-professionally in Hearthstone, the card game. And that's when I was playing in tournaments for Good Gaming, and that's how like I got noticed by Good Gaming, and I got hired to run their Minecraft server. And so that's kind of the history. Like getting a little bit further into Good Gaming, we went through a lot. We did pretty well with the Minecraft server, right? And we have like a lot of people. We had millions of users come through our doors. We have 700,000 users waiting in the winks on our Mindcade and the Limbo networks. And even despite being through an incubator phase, we finally came out of that when we found this opportunity with blockchain gaming, and I'm really happy to get into the AMA here. So yeah.
I'm so excited. Okay, so there are two things that you said that I've got to ask. Number one, what did your mom and dad say? Parents, other family members, are they like, oh my gosh, you're gaming again? Are you gaming? Get off of that computer? Because I know I used to do that to my daughter all the time, yet I see now I'm like totally reformed and totally understand that this is the next thing in not only gaming but obviously education, empowering students. So first, tell me all about that. Like, what was it like growing up with you as like this prodigy?
Yeah, my parents, at first they had no idea what was going on. I was just on the computer too much, and this was when I was making like real money from Club Penguin when I was like 12 years old, and my parents had no idea. Like I was just spending all the money on clothes because I was a kid, and I was just like, but they had no idea. They didn't know how I was making all this money, getting a bunch of clothes. I was always selling stuff on eBay and like ebooks for Club Penguin and stuff like that. Like, yeah, they at first they didn't even get it, but once they got it, they were just kind of amazed. And it's just like they just like, I mean, it wasn't like when I was into CS:GO stuff, they're like, how can you make money on the computer? And it's just like, I mean, it's not that crazy. It's just like it's something you know, just part of like the generation growing up. We could do a lot of really cool stuff, and it was very early on, and I mean I hit it pretty good, and I was like, that's when I kind of like found myself and like what I wanted to do in my life, like really young. So
I
yeah.
love that. So you're like basically like running this whole business out of your house at the age of 12.
Yeah.
Selling things on eBay, total e-commerce, early e-commerce adopter. I love it. That's awesome. Okay, so what about your friends? Like, what was it like? Were your friends also gamers when you were growing up? You have siblings?
Yeah, I mean, actually, so I'm the oldest child, so I have one sibling. My brother, I mean, he's a super like big console gamer. All my friends, you know, my friends came from a lot of different backgrounds. Some of them weren't gamers at all, and some of them were just like astonished that like there was like Club Penguin involved, like, and some of them made fun of me for it, and other ones like were just like, well, I'm your biggest fan, I can't believe I know you, like you're so famous, like stuff like that. There's just like a bunch of different, like, you know, it was just like any normal life, honestly, like just a lot of tech nerd friends, stuff like that.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so now do you keep in touch with them and do you talk about MicroBuddies, NFTs, gaming,
Oh yeah, of
blockchain? Do
course.
you
Yeah.
get to educate people on blockchain?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Yeah, one of my best friends is very interested, and we're pretty into crypto in general together. And yeah, it's pretty cool. Like ever pretty much surrounds my entire life now.
I love it. So if you were going to explain to a blockchain to everyone out there, right? There's always so many different ways to explain it. So tell me how you explain it.
So the way I explain it is I like to bring the internet into the description, because the internet's another like technology that when you try to sit down and think about like how do you explain what the internet is kind of like weird, but you can kind of summarize the internet as a tool for information transfer. That's really what it is, right? And that kind of transformed every aspect of our lives, right? Like from business to like how we interact with each other, right? Like even this live stream is like this is a form of information transfer. So what the blockchain can be summarized into is value transfer, because all the information on the blockchain is, you know, effectively immutable. So you can say it's technically not immutable, but probably in the best way that it's not technically not immutable, because the people who support the network of a blockchain can, you know, they all represent basically voting power on the network, and they can change things if more than half the network agrees to change things, essentially, right? I mean, it's a really simplified example, but in a nutshell, that's kind of how the blockchain works. Nothing can really be changed unless everybody agrees. It's fully decentralized. There's no like company that controls what happens, that can like, you know, censor content on there or change things. So if you were to put like, you know, if you were to make a piece of digital content, like a, you know, like a piece of art that's original to you, traditionally on the internet, someone can just right click it, download it, and claim it's theirs. And that's why you have to have like copyrights and all kinds of stuff, and it gets really complicated. But on the blockchain, you could upload that same piece of art, and there's no way anybody can claim that it's theirs if you have it uploaded, and you know, you imagine a system where everybody's using it, right? You have a immutable timestamp, well, you know, virtually immutable, of like when you put that image or that digital asset on the blockchain. And so someone else can like go and do it too, but they won't have the same provenance because theirs will come up later, right? So like um the reason why that gives everything like value is because, like, you know, you can look at, like, for example, in the real world with art, like the Mona Lisa is priceless, even though a good counterfeiter could make one that's, you know, visually identical to like to the human eye, right? So
Right.
so on the blockchain, you get to achieve that same level of like physical asset. But on the blockchain, you can do this with, you know, I gave basically an example, which was an NFT with an image. You can do it with like music. You could do it with like the deed to your home, right? If someone tries to like claim they own your home, and maybe they have the paper copy of of the title, or something, right? Like you can prove that it's yours. You can show the entire transfer history of your home's deed. You can have the timestamp on it that's your. I mean, it's just, maybe I'm like going way out there, but like there's a
No,
lot of crazy stuff. Yeah.
so you are right on. So John Merkovec, in Chicago here, he spoke at Athena for me, and he also spoke. I've seen him at lots of conferences. But they put a home on a blockchain. We'll call it a blockchain, because when people say the blockchain, well, there's lots of different blockchains, right? There's different protocols, but he put a home on a blockchain just to show that you could put that on and then take that off. And so Lexi from Chicago Blockchain Project had done some of the meetups. There's what I love about the blockchain communities. There's always meetups, well, not in COVID, but there was always meetups and there were always events, right? And when it's always about talking about people, but it's so interesting that you say that, because you know, you have these assets, and I don't know about you, but if you've ever like lost something in your digital life on your hard drive and you're like, oh, I don't know where that thing is, right? But if it's on a blockchain and it's stamped and hashed, it's, you know, it's not going to get accidentally deleted, which is nice. But you said something else. You said something about assets, and you said about, you know, you're talking about like characteristics or things like the Mona Lisa could be the same, but you know, as far as visually the same, but there are these other characteristics. Can you tell me like more about that and NFTs? Like how are those two things similar?
Yeah, so with physical art, you have what really is provenance. Like the original Mona Lisa is the original, no matter how close you could get a copy of it. Just the fact that you could like identify with like a magnifier, like or not a microscope, sorry. You know, you could use a lot of tools to verify that the original Mona Lisa is the original Mona Lisa, and that's why it has so much value in the physical world. You have a similar power with art on the blockchain, because you can go and analyze the piece of art on the blockchain. You can see when it was created in time, and you can literally like very easily verify that you have the first, you know, piece of that art. Like if anybody tries to contest your claim, you can literally see a timestamp of when that existed. Whereas like in other mediums like the internet, you can easily have, you know, hackers and things like that who can change dates and timestamps and influence things. So when you have a big decentralized network that's very well like bootstrap, like you have like tens of thousands of people like Bitcoin or Ethereum that can like, you know, secure a network and keep bad actors from changing dates and stuff like that. You have a very powerful tool for value storage, right? And the crazy thing where NFTs go even beyond like physical art is that you can add code to them, right? So like code on the blockchain is written in the form of smart contracts, right? And so smart contracts are just like real world contracts, except with real world contracts, you can technically break them, even though it might be illegal and you can get sued and get all kinds of trouble. With smart contracts, it's code. So if you know, as long as the code is written properly, you have like people who've audited it and looked at it and made sure it's secure. It can't be broken. It's pure logic. There's no human emotion that can get in the way. There's no greed that can get in the way that can try to steal it from you. As long as the code is, you know, solid, like smart contracts are very powerful tools. So you can program art, right? And so as we get into the MicroBuddies conversation, we'll talk about that, because, you know, we're essentially making video game items which have functionality in a, you know, in a game world that can do things like real, like things that, you know, you can have fun with and get, you know, it provides art utility, right? Just like in a video game. So now we turn those items into NFTs, just like, you know, valuable pieces of work, and that gives them real world value, right? And it takes kind of the control out of the central company's hand and puts it into the players, right? So
Yeah. No, that's awesome, because that goes right into the next, you know, what I wanted to talk about, which was MicroBuddies and NFTs and all the amazing things you can do with blockchain as far as smart contracts go. So, you know, you talked about how smart contract is a contract, right? And it's just automated. So what types of things would like the user see as far as a smart contract? Like when you're saying code audit, you're talking about a cybersecurity firm, right?
Yep.
But like if the user wanted to know more about, you know, their MicroBuddy, right? Because there's a lot of different things you talk about, the I think it's the fertility of it, right? I think that's the word that is used,
there's a lot of
right?
mechanics.
Yeah, and all the aspects, like are those characteristics. So we get our Nano Factory tokens, right? And we'll talk about that in just a minute, because you got to go to microbuddies.io and get your Nano Factory tokens. Oh, it's super exciting, and I can't wait to see which ones I got. But anyway, okay. So you get your Nano Factory token, and then you're going to burn it or use it, right, to make the NFT. So when you do that, those characteristics, if you go to the MicroBuddies.io site, there's all of these, the 10 species are listed there. Tell us a little bit about how those characteristics are like baked into the code, or like how do we know that those characteristics are there? Does that make sense?
So Yeah, so okay, so just to explain the process, I want to like go over it. Also
Okay.
there's a question in the comments. I just want to like
Oh, good, good.
I just saw this one just real quick from Swifty. I think Swifty's like in our Discord stuff. Like he's great. He asked,
Awesome.
does Good Gaming own the rights to Goo or does Vi One Services? So the answer to that's actually neither. So it's cryptocurrency. So we put it on the blockchain and it's going to exist in a decentralized way. So the rights to it are basically given to the holder. So whoever has the goo, it's their goo, and it's completely disconnected from the company. But anyway, back to your question. So with the Nano Factory tokens, there's 2,500 of them, right? And so I'm going to use the example 2,500 because it's easier to do the math that I'm about to get into. But technically, 10 of those are for founder
Mhm.
MicroBuddies, which very briefly, founder MicroBuddies are 10 unique MicroBuddies that are generation 0, but they cannot replicate and they do not make goo. They have a way of getting goo, and we'll get into that for sure later when we start talking about goo. But anyway, we'll say 2,500 Nano Factory tokens. When the game launches, you'll be able to turn your Nano Factory tokens that you have into a Generation 0 MicroBuddy. Again, there's only going to be 2,500 of those. Now, on the website, you'll be able to look at and visualize how the MicroBuddy looks, right? You'll have like an image and you'll be able to see a layout of all of its traits. You'll be able to see its dominant traits, which are how it looks, all of its appearance, it's from its body color to what it's wearing on its head or its eyes, its mouth, everything. And then it has recessive traits as well, which is, a collection of traits that don't show up on the MicroBuddy, but when you replicate it, they could show up in the future, right? Like one of the dominant traits, like it could have some like, yeah, it could have like, it could have, kind of normal eyes when you first get it as a Gen Zero, but then when the first time you replicate it, the new one that comes out like has like cross eyes. You're just like, what is this? And so, you get into this thing where you're replicating your MicroBuddies over and over, right? It's a fairly simple premise, right? But it expands a lot because each Gen 0 MicroBuddy that you'll get will have 5 replications available, right? So you'll be able to replicate it 5 times, which means you'll be able to get 5 Generation 1 MicroBuddies, right? You'll still keep your Generation 0 MicroBuddy. You'll still own that. It'll run out of replications and it will become infertile, but that's okay because it's a very rare Gen 0 and it's still going to be a fabulous collectible. Basically, once it runs out of replications, it becomes like like a standard NFT, like you would think of like as CryptoPunks or something, right? Like a collectible. But now you have 5 Generation 1 MicroBuddies. So if you do the math on that, there will actually be 12,500 roughly. Right, if you take it from the number 2,500 times 5, you'll have 12,500 MicroBuddies in Generation 1. And so this is where you start to get into where like you can sell your MicroBuddy. Maybe you don't want to sell your Gen 0, right? Maybe you want to turn it into a bunch of Gen 1s and maybe sell one of your 5 Gen 1s, right, to some new player who didn't get in during the pre-sale, right? And so that's how the game propagates, right? And so when you have that Gen 0, now you have 5 Generation 1 MicroBuddies. You'll be able to see all their traits and everything, just like the first one. You can replicate all 5 of those, generally 5 times. There's going to be a little bit of a random math to how many replications they get. But in general, like with a low generation MicroBuddy, you'll get around 5. So, if there's 12,500 Gen 1s, then there's going to be, something like 60 something thousand Gen 2s, or right, and then the 60 something thousand Gen 2s is going to go to like 300 something thousand in Gen 3, and then by the time you get to Gen 10, there's going to be billions of MicroBuddies, right? So I saw a
Right.
question on our Discord earlier about like how people are going to be able to play if there's only 2,500 MicroBuddies. So that kind of answers that
Mhm.
question, right? There's potentially billions of MicroBuddies. So there's plenty for people, and the lower the generation, the more scarce they are, and the more rare they are as collectibles, right? Um, so yeah, I maybe went really in depth on your question, but yeah.
No, that's great. I think that's awesome because that's what other people were asking too was what happens when there aren't anymore? Because I didn't know exactly about this where they become infertile, like they can't replicate
Yep.
anymore. So then I wasn't sure,
That's a
what
supply
would happen
control, yeah.
after. Okay, cool.
Yeah, so yeah, I can explain that real quick. So basically this concept is it's essentially like it's like a much different way than like CryptoKitties does it, right? So CryptoKitties um I think they have they can just breed kind of forever. They just have like breeding cooldowns that increase and increase the more frequently you breed them. But this is a concept, right, that is fairly well proven, right, because of games like CryptoKitties, other breeding NFT games that you can like kind of just have a NFT that I mean is even like just kind of sitting there as a collectible and it will have value. CryptoKitties has 50,000 Generation 0 cats, And so by contrast, we have 2,500 Gen Zero cats or MicroBuddies, right? So you can imagine like the difference in value there. And then the other obviously is that ours self-replicate, so that changes the game a lot. We'll get into like the more mechanics there. But anyway, with fertility, your microbuddy can run out of replications and it can become infertile, which will make it where he can make no more. So that one is now, we just call it in the game, we call it barren. It can't do anything else. It even stops producing goo at that point, right? So yeah, so there's another feature in the game as well called apoptosis, where if you want, you can go destroy your infertile microbuddy and collect a portion of the goo it's made over its entire lifetime. Now, I don't think anybody would want to commit apoptosis on a Gen Zero microbuddy, even an infertile one. But you know, if someone did, it would just make the rest of them more valuable. But anyway, that's basically how the game works. And the higher the generations get, so if you get up to like generation 10, where there's like, you know, there's potentially billions of microbuddies in circulation, that's when there starts to become a downward pressure on the amount of replications a microbuddy starts with, right? So once you get higher, you can still get a microbuddy with 5 replications, but you'll start to get lower and lower odds, like worse odds to where you'll start getting microbuddies with only 1 replication, right? And eventually, once you get to a high enough generation, like into the 30s, 40s, 50s, maybe even like, you know, maybe you can keep a tree of life going till like generation 100, but eventually the next microbuddy you breed will have 0 replications left, and that entire family tree will just be like null and void, right? Because you'll run out of replication. So if you think about it, everything is stemming from the Gen Zero, like into this big game. But to keep the supply down, there's like a downward curve on the amount of replications microbuddies have as the generation grows higher. Which like there's more exact math in the documentation and stuff like that, and replications do have an impact on like goo production, and the higher generation microbuddies are typically going to have better traits because they're, you know, because they've been more bred like than like the basic traits, so they're going to make more goo. So the higher generations, even though they're plentiful, they're going to have a lot of value because they make more goo, and the lower generations will have a lot of value because they're more collectible. And so that's kind of how the game works, right?
Yeah, that's so cool. So there's like really something in it for everyone. And that kind of goes back to what Joseph was saying, because Joseph, our investment guy, right? He's investment banker, stock expert, amazing guy. He was, you know, he was like, you know, there's this whole element of people that are buying these Gen Zeros or the Nano Factory tokens, right? Sorry, it's loud out there. And that are buying them just for that collectible, and then they want to, you know, resell that part of it. So I can see like there's almost something in it for everyone, which is super cool. But on the topic, when we were talking about traits, one thing that I keep seeing in a lot of the articles and documentation and things like that, just things on the website, is that you can lock in characteristics with goo.
Yep.
Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yep. So that's the artificial selection feature. So there's 2 elements of that. So if you get a trait on your microbuddy that you really like, and whenever you replicate your microbuddy, it can lose like its traits. Its traits can get mixed and matched all through its genome. So if you get a really rare trait that's like, you know, looks really cool, it's really rare, it produces a lot of goo, and you don't want it to leave your dominant traits, so because you want to keep getting that goo, you can lock it in, right? And so all of this, by the way, like replicating your microbuddy, it costs goo to do. So because goo is the virtual currency of the game. So when you lock in a trait on a microbuddy, that also costs goo. So it increases the replication fee. You can lock in up to 3 traits on your microbuddy. So you'll be able to like keep them through generations as long as you pay the extra goo for that. Then the other side of the equation is trait re-rolling, right? So now you can go into the recessive traits of your microbuddy. So if there's like some really bad trait in there that doesn't make any goo and it's really common, you want to get rid of it, you can go and select that. You can get rid of up to 4 traits out of the recessive gene, so that whenever those become dominant later, you can maybe get like rare ones. And so that's how you get to the point where you can make like a perfect microbuddy with all the rarest traits and highest goo productivity and stuff like that. But the whole time you're paying goo, so you want to be able to make goo so that you can like use the goo in the game. That's essentially a virtual currency in a video game, except we also turn it into a cryptocurrency. But yeah.
That's so cool. And one of our big fans, and he makes so much great content. Paul Cordell. I think he's out there. Red Pack Stocks. He's awesome. He calls himself Goo Guardian. I love it. Goo tokens. So he's got me all thinking about goo and the uses of it. And there's some mechanisms in goo, like there's some mechanisms in certain cryptocurrencies that keep them to be, whether it's an anti-inflationary method or it helps modulate the supply in another way. So can you tell us what is in goo? How do you control that supply of goo? You kind of alluded to it a little bit, but I think there might be
Yeah.
more to it.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot to goo. So the natural concern should be that if all the MicroBuddies are making goo, like how do we stop it from like just going crazy and being infinite? Um, So the way we address that is with something called a peg value. Essentially, the cap, there is no hard cap on the amount of goo because that would cause a problem gameplay wise, right? If you need goo to replicate and we are at the cap and your microbuddy couldn't make any more goo, you would run into issues playing the game, which would hurt goo, right? So we can't have a cap, but what we can do is that we can have a soft cap, which is all the way up at around 100 billion. So you can expect each goo token to be, like kind of like the price of Doge, right? Like really cheap. Like Doge is like somewhere like 120 billion or so. I don't know. It's always inflating. But anyway, we're gonna have supply controls. Okay, so like not like that, but so the microbuddies will keep making goo. But as the supply approaches 100 billion, they'll start to make less and less goo. So if the supply goes above 100 billion, MicroBuddies will start making a lot less goo until the supply comes back down. And the way the supply comes down is when you're playing the game. Actually, 65% of every bit of goo you spend playing the game in replication, trait like locking in traits, re-rolling, 65% of that goo is burnt forever, destroyed from the supply to keep the supply down. And so that's how we control for the supply of goo and keep it down. And so basically what happens is when the supply gets above 100 billion, the microbuddies start producing less and less goo. And so it kind of incentivizes people to spend that supply in the game, which gets rid of it, right? And when the supply falls under 100 billion, as it will be way under 100 billion at the beginning of the game, microbuddies make a lot of goo. They get like a huge boost in how much goo they make because the supply needs to get up to that 100 billion target. So it tries to stay as stable as possible at 100 billion to keep the value of goo stable and just keep the game from being like too hard or too easy. And so yeah, that's it.
That's so cool. I love all of those different supply mechanisms. It's really interesting. It's almost like the goo then that you're expending in order to make your next microbuddy or to roll in the traits is almost like a transaction fee in a way. That helps the network. Is that
yeah, kind of. I mean, the way I like to think of it is like it's like if you get like gold in a game, in like a video game, like you get gold and you have to spend it on different things that you want to do in the game. So like this is a very similar concept, right? Where goo is the game currency that you spend to do the things that you do in the game. Now, it's a simple concept, and you just go in there, you replicate your microbuddy, you can lock in traits, you can reroll traits, you try to make the most productive microbuddy possible that makes the most goo possible, and you spin the goo, and that's basically how it works. And some of it's shoveled out of the supply to keep the supply low, and this is in a nutshell, right? So like this is, again, I like to relate it to like how CryptoKitties has like kind of proven the concept of making collectible NFTs, right? That you can just breed and you can just get more collectibles. Now we're taking that one step further, where the microbuddies are also collectible the same way, but they also are now producing cryptocurrency that is a game currency. Like you actually have like kind of a real game where you actually spend goo in the game, right? So
that's so cool. What else do we get to do in the game? Like, can you tell us, like, because you say playing the game, like what would like if I was gonna play, what would I get to do? Can you tell me like
yeah, so like I would say imagine like well, for anybody who is familiar with the other NFT breeding games, I reference CryptoKitties a lot because it's like the biggest one out there right now. It's very simple, built in the browser, right? So you go in the game, and you'll see a collection of all your microbuddies that are in your wallet, and you can do a bunch of different things. You essentially, like, if you want to go to the replicator, you just go to the replicator, you choose what microbuddy you want to replicate. It'll say what the goofy is, and you'll process an Ethereum transaction, right? So you'll have like a small ETH fee. I think someone in the Twitch chat asked like what the fees are. That's something that's still in development. We've got the fees down quite a bit now, but yeah, I don't want to go into too much detail about that because like that is a priority. We're trying to get the gas fees as low as possible. It's not too bad right now. It's really dependent on like what the network fee on Ethereum is, which is another reason why we're talking about like going into the layer 2 chains where all gas fees are basically zero, and like Polygon, for example, where we can bridge over there if gas fees do become an issue in the future. But right now they're pretty good in our testing. but anyway, I'm digressing. In the game, you choose a MicroBuddy. You can replicate it by doing a transaction. It's the same thing with trait locking and swapping. These are all like done with transactions on the Ethereum blockchain, and also for collecting your MicroBuddies goo, of course. Like you'll be able to like take all the goo from all of your MicroBuddies all at once. With a click of one button essentially, and play the game from there. So yeah,
Oh,
that's
wow. That's
yeah,
cool.
that's most of the functions of the game, right? So you still have like apoptosis, which I mean, it's all done with like you choose a MicroBuddy, and you either pay goo or you get goo, and you perform Ethereum transactions around that. And there's other stuff that we can get into, like liquidity provision and stuff, which is like much more complicated concepts, but it's a part of the game and part of like helping goo be a liquid cryptocurrency on like decentralized exchanges, which is also planned. Saw some questions about that.
Oh, cool. And then, okay, are there more questions that you want to take? Because that's cool. I'll just.
Yeah. Let me look through the questions here real quick, because we got quite a bit built up here, but I think we actually covered a lot of them.
Oh, good,
Um,
good.
so someone asked, are MicroBuddies randomly distributed day one? So actually what happens is whenever you go onto the site to synthesize a MicroBuddy or a Nano Factory token into a Gen 0 MicroBuddy, at that point in time, that's when it's generated. So all the code is ran at that time to choose what its traits are going to be, what it's going to look like, and all that stuff. Now there's a pool of MicroBuddies, which you can see on microbuddies.io, like the exact number of each MicroBuddy, and that totals up to 2,490. Because I saw another question about why the MicroBuddies totaled to 2,490 when there's 2,500 Nano Factory tokens. So 10 of the Nano Factory tokens we hold, and we're using those for the 10 founders, which are totally separate from the normal species because they don't replicate and they don't make goo, and they're for the founders, with the exception of one of the founders, which we don't know exactly what we're going to do with yet, by the way. We might auction it off or do some giveaway with like to a really dedicated community member who like deserves it or something like that. But the founders are another important part of the game, that we can get into in a second. Let me look through a few more questions.
And then while you look through those questions and think about those, I just wanted to say one more thing, because that's something I've seen a few times on Twitter now, is that sometimes when someone is trying to purchase one of the Nano Factory tokens and they don't have enough ETH in their wallet, and I know that I saw this in the documentation, is that if you don't have enough ETH in your wallet, just because there's slippage, just because it can be a little volatile, right? That it will show you some ridiculous fee in gas.
Oh,
and
yeah.
so usually gas is quite, it's not cheap, but it's nominal. So just while you were looking through that, I just wanted to make sure I said that, because I think I've said that a few times to different people today. So
yeah, for sure. Yeah, if there's not enough ETH in your wallet to pay the gas fees, it just shows hundreds of dollars for the gas fee for some reason. It's like a loop thing with MetaMask gas prediction, I think. But yeah, so I think someone else asked about I think Coach Nick actually asked a question. I lost it, but it has to do with like being able to buy what generations you can buy on day one. So essentially, the way the game works is whenever you make your Gen 0 MicroBuddy, you are the one who sells. So you get to choose, do you sell your Gen 0, or do you make a Gen 1, or do you make a Gen 2 and sell the Gen 2, right? Like as a company, Good Gaming is not going to be selling any other MicroBuddies outside of these Nano Factory tokens. That's it. Like as soon as the game comes out, the Nano Factory tokens are gone and the game is in the player's hands. Like everybody, like all you guys who have Nano Factory tokens, you make the MicroBuddies, you sell the MicroBuddies, you farm the goo, like everything is yours. As for a company, and again, I see another question about like the revenue model for the company is like, how do we make money then if it all goes to the players? And it's very simple, right? It's we take a 5% royalty on the sales of the MicroBuddies, and that's it, right? So you can imagine like how incredible that is, and that gets into the video game model that we're kind of like trying to prove the concept of right now, with the potential to be very powerful, because it's really based on the ability to resell a MicroBuddy, right? So like a player can go and sell, a very rare water bear, and let's say it's a Gen 0 water bear, which is expected to be very rare, right? Let's say they sell one, let's say it's like, it's going for $100,000, right? If they sell that, we get 5% of that. But if the person who buys it also like turns around and upsells it for like 110,000 or something, that's another 5% on the same MicroBuddy, right? So that's basically how the business's revenue model works. Like the players get basically, the other 95% of the profits. we take 5% on every single individual transaction. So that's how the revenue model works really well, because it doesn't require us to like, like a traditional video game who keeps like reinvesting a lot of money into making microtransactions to get revenue, right? Instead, we can just collect a royalty essentially and invest money into making the gameplay better and like focusing on serving the players even more. And the players essentially have a share of like all the profits by being a part of the game and like literally owning the assets, right? So it's an entirely new model that I think it's more profitable for the business, and it's more fair for the customer, and it's it's a financial opportunity for players, and kind of like my thing growing up, right, with all the CS:GO and like video game gambling stuff. I mean that would have been huge for me, right? If like if I didn't get banned for selling items in video games. Those are huge markets, with even as black markets, like World of Warcraft's gold market back in like 2009 when gaming was still pretty small, was estimated at over $1 billion, right? That market, while it was illegal to do. So yeah, this is a very potentially very huge market, because the gamer dream is really to be able to make a living playing video games, and this enables that. And it's kind of like everybody takes a share, and I think it's the fairest situation we have. So yeah.
Well, on that same element though, it's
Mhm.
not just like, let's talk about the yield. And when we're talking about goo farming and things, because we were talking about Axie Infinity just a little bit ago, right? You and I were, and we were saying, you were telling me like some people in, what was it, like was it Vietnam, were becoming actual, like that was their career, was to be, a liquidity, well, whether it's liquidity or whatever their version is, to farm it and create that, to farm that yield, right? The IPY.
Yeah.
So how does that work in MicroBuddies? Because this is very much to the good gaming whole ethos, right? It's where amateurs become pros, right? So not only are you doing it in gameplay, you're also doing it with math and investment and things, if I understand it correctly. So can you tell me more about that?
Yeah. So how we get into DeFi, right? So that's kind of where we start.
Yeah.
So it's with the goo token, right? And at the beginning of the game, what we can have is, we list on a decentralized exchange. For people who aren't familiar, that's like, maybe you've heard of like Uniswap. Um, there's a lot of other things, but I'll use Uniswap since it's the biggest, as an example. Essentially, the way it traditionally works is, people can provide liquidity, for two cryptocurrencies, in what's known as a liquidity pool. So if you wanted to buy goo on Uniswap, you would need ETH to buy it, right? So someone would need to be providing a pool of goo and Ethereum for a decentralized exchange to determine what the value of goo is relative to ETH, and like to have the goo supply available to give you goo. And also, if you want to sell goo, it needs to have the ETH supply available to give you ETH. And when I say ETH, Ethereum is what I'm talking about, right? This is essentially what a liquidity pool is. And so you need goo and Ethereum. So the way we get into DeFi is we actually, we incentivize players to help provide that liquidity. So if a player goes in and takes their goo and some of their ETH and they put it in a liquidity pool so people can trade goo, they'll be rewarded first off with the default, like kind of the swap fee, which is like whenever somebody goes and buys crypto, from the swap, you get 0.3% of the trading fee, or your like portion. And this is a whole rabbit hole that anybody's interested can like look into, because there's also risks associated with it, and all kinds of things with liquidity provision. So the way we incentivize it and like kind of curb the risk is we allow liquidity providers to stake their liquidity tokens, which you get for providing liquidity, on our site, and in exchange they get 20% of all the breeding fees of the game, right? So it's a huge incentive to, like, keep the game being played, which is like kind of the player centric model that we're going for, to like have the community kind of bootstrap the game, right? So this is essentially how DeFi starts. And it's already probably, like, for people who aren't familiar, like when I was first getting into this, it's so complicated. But this is just the beginning, right, of like how DeFi works. But people provide liquidity, they put their liquidity tokens on our site, and they get goo. They get their share of the game. So that's where 65% of the goo is burnt, 20% of the game, or the goo, goes to the liquidity providers, and then the remaining 15% in that equation, that goes to the 10 founders distributed evenly. So that's where all the goo goes. And then there's also kind of governance voting that we have planned to be able to change those values as necessary. Like if we need to burn more or need to bootstrap more to the liquidity providers or whatever we need to do to keep the game functional, like the community can essentially have the power to decide those kind of things. That's definitely a big part of our roadmap too. So if that makes sense, people can go even deeper into it. Like if you've heard of like big yield farming places like Compound Finance, or like some of them that are on the rise right now, and other blockchains like Beefy Finance, you can actually they can actually set up vaults that yield farm for you, that you can just like put your goo in, and they'll do all the liquidity provision with a smart contract with code and put it on our site, farm the goo, and maybe they'll even take the goo and they'll sell it for you and turn it into ETH for you, or like who knows what they'll make with the vaults. And that's how you get like yields and like real like percentage APYs out of the 20% breeding fee cut that you get. It's really deep. So
it's amazing. There's just so much there. But this is really interesting because you hit on a point that 2 points actually. One was about governance, right? Because we talk about that all the time in blockchain. And sometimes it just sounds crazy, but really, like, can you explain, like, because that means that the players get to decide how the game is shaped,
which is
like an adventure.
Yeah, I mean, this is why I'm so like I'm just like I'm insanely excited about blockchain. Like it was like late last year when I kind of put it all together. Like I knew about crypto for years. I loved gaming my whole life. And I loved like the idea of like having player centric models. You know, it's gonna sound silly, but like when I look at the business side of things, like I always like looked up to like Jeff Bezos, like in the early 2000s when he talked about like relentless focus on the customer, right? And so like applying that to gaming is a relentless focus on the player. And like big games that like I idolize, like League of Legends, you know, they claim they're the most player focused game on the planet. And with blockchain, you become so player focused, it just blows all those ideas out of the water, right? Because every single element of the game, like the players own the items, the players sell the items, the players make the money, the players provide like liquidity to bootstrap it, they vote on the changes for the game, everything is provided by the players. So that's essentially what we're doing, what we're aiming to do, right? So at game launch, we're going to have a few mechanics that will allow us to kind of like slowly set off on that path of allowing players to take over the governance and take over the kind of functions of the game and vote on what needs to change about the game and important matters, and like how much money should liquidity providers get, or do we need to burn more? Like are we way over our 100 billion goo supply? We need to come together and vote to burn more of the goo, or it's essentially just play a run, and that's kind of the beauty of it, why I get so excited and I can just talk about it for hours.
No, that's awesome. It's so exciting because the governance aspect is what's really interesting. Were there any other questions before I like ask my next question?
Let me see here. Well, a lot of nice things being said, so but not exactly the question. Someone's asking about testing. So yeah, that's where we're at right now. We're officially launching into our closed beta test net, I believe on Monday. That's our official. So we're already doing a lot of testing right now. But when we've officially launched into closed beta, that kind of marks the moment where the game is functionally complete, and we're doing important game balancing and monitoring for like trying to bring down gas fees and trying to make sure everything's secure, there's no major exploits, and a lot of stuff like that. And it also opens the opportunity that we could potentially, we don't have plans to do this right now, so I'll just say that, but we could potentially like start inviting in testers, which will most likely be like Nano Factory token holders, because they're the primary people who would deserve to be able to get in and test the game. So if we do get to that point where we need more testers, maybe we need to load balance or like test like the upper limits of the supply of goo, we need a bunch of people to come in for that. That's kind of what this stage of development is, for anybody wondering. So yeah.
And if they want to know all about that and want to be on any list of testing, right, it's got to be all about Discord, right? Discord is where there's so much interaction there. There's all of the people that know all about the game are there. So that's probably a good place to check it out, right?
Yeah. Discord is the primary place for the community. If you want to chat with us, I mean, you could just type in your web browser discord.gg/microbuddies. So yeah, everybody hangs out there. The whole community's there. You can ask any questions. I'm in there. Our entire team's in there. So that's also where we meet to like do our daily meetings and do art and all the stuff. So everything's happening in Discord. I just want to look at this question. A couple more came up.
Mhm.
Um, so what is the estimated cost to the player to perform one replication of their microbuddy? So the replication cost is in Goo. So actually, you do have to pay ETH though for the gas fee, but it's not like CryptoKitties where it's just like there's an actual breeding fee paid in ETH. So the breeding fees in our game are paid in Goo. There will be an ETH gas fee, which is again is something that we're messing around with. I think right now we've got the gas fee started when we started doing the replication. It started like $70, and it was like, whoa, that's really high to replicate your microbuddy. But now I think last we have it at like $20 or $15, and we're still working it down. So that's part of the beta testing. But in terms of Goo, so there is some interesting content about how the Goo works. So right now, and again, like most of the game, since we're still in an active state of development, I just want to kind of like put a disclaimer now that things can get tweaked. Like we might change numbers depending on like if it makes sense or not. Like if things are too easy or too hard or whatever, we'll change numbers. But anyway, the way goofies work is roughly it's roughly 3 times the goo per day of your microbuddy. So every microbuddy's goo production is measured in goo per day, and that's how much goo your microbuddy makes in a day. So it's fairly straightforward. And the cost to replicate, the base cost to replicate, is 3 times the goo per day. So it would take you basically 3 days to get enough goo to replicate. And so that kind of helps also give value. It makes the game harder, but it also gives value to goo. Is that because if you don't want to wait 3 days, you can go and, I mean, either you can have more microbuddies that make more goo so you can do it faster, or you can go and buy it from another player, buy goo from another player who's willing to sell it, who's not hoarding all their goo for their own replication fees, right? So that's essentially how goo works. But now you also bring in the peg value that I talked about earlier. So when the game starts, the peg value will most likely be around 10, which basically means your goo production is multiplied by 10. So if you get a Gen 0 microbuddy with some goo production of like, just for a simple example, we'll say it produces 100 goo per day, right? With the peg value at 10, because the supply is so far under 100 billion, the goo production of microbuddy will actually be 1,000, but the replication fee will still be 3 times 100, if that makes sense, right? So the replication
Yeah.
fee will be 300, but your microbuddy will be making 1,000 goo a day. So it'll be really easy and really fast to replicate your microbuddies like crazy early on. But as soon as that supply of goo starts shooting up, the goo production of your microbuddy starts shooting down, more goo starts getting burnt, and the system starts to churn. But like whenever you get in, like that's basically at the beginning of the game, right? You get this massive surge of like goo and like being able to do a lot of things because that'll get the supply where it needs to be to like sell it out to more players and like get more people into the game for the players to have enough, enough liquidity out there in both terms of micro buddies and goo for more people to get involved. Yep.
Well, that's awesome. It's like a just big motivation factor, reinforcement factor, just to get everyone playing early, right? Which is why it's always, that's why we keep talking about when there's only this many tokens. And it sounds like the best way to start is early on. So I can't
Yeah.
wait. I'm
And
so excited.
yeah, and I see another question, which so I think John here, he says the only issue I see is that people not playing. So I want to address that because that's something that we've thought about a lot too. So at a base level, the Gen 0 microbuddies, even if for some reason nobody played, there would still be a very high collectability to those. But what I would say is that it's almost inevitable that people will play because if you have all these people with Gen 0 microbuddies that all want to hold on to it, it only takes one person to be like, I'm going to replicate my microbuddy and start selling it. And then what happens is that one person who's replicating and selling is going to have way more goo than everybody else. They're going to have the most, like all the microbuddy supply, and they're going to be selling it to all the people who are interested. And that's going to make massive value for each of the microbuddies. So other Gen 0 holders are going to be like, hey, wait a second, like I want a piece of this. And they're going to get involved too. So it's almost inevitable that there's going to be like, even if everybody was like trying to hoard the microbuddies and not play the game, right? It's almost inevitable that there's going to be that straw that breaks the camel's back, right? That just opens it all up because one person doing like everything or like two people doing everything will be way too much value. So it's just a supply demand problem. I mean that's kind of the idea is like post launch, we're still going to be doing important marketing and getting the game off the ground. But at a certain point, we're going to like we're not going to even be needed, right? Like once enough people are involved in like and enjoying the game, right? It will live on its own, and players will be incentivized to continue its legacy forever. And I mean, this essentially how a normal video game functions, but then we bring it to the blockchain. So
which is so cool, because then you have that governance piece where if something isn't working, or if there's something that needs to be tweaked or something like that, that's what you have the governance piece for, right? Which is allows the players to, this might be a better way. So it seems like it's very dynamic from the standpoint that just because we were talking so much about player centric and things too. So.
Yeah, it's meant to be as adaptable as possible to whatever circumstances come up with it, right? So because essentially the game will live forever. It's on the Ethereum blockchain, so I mean, as long as the Ethereum blockchain lives, MicroBuddies will live no matter what happens, right? So that's in a nutshell. I think like the crazy thing about like CryptoKitties has been around forever, but just like people in the mainstream have like kind of just started taking note, right? And these games like this, CryptoKitties has been around since like 2017, and it's been big since then. I mean, if you remember in 2017 when CryptoKitties first came out, it crashed Ethereum because people were so crazy about it that like it just ruined the network's fees. Like nobody could really use Ethereum for a while, and it's still huge today. That's like why I believe in this so much, is because we're taking that concept to the next level, adding cryptocurrency, adding way bigger of a player centric model, and you know getting into this like proof of concept of this new video game model that like I'm really excited about.
So on that same note, remember when we were talking about to replicate, there's a small ETH fee. And I just wanted to go back over that, because just like when we buy our Nano Factory tokens, right? Anytime you write something to the Ethereum blockchain, because you're putting it on there, those fees go to the Ethereum miners, right? Because cryptocurrency is mined. So if you're replicating, right, I'm guessing that the fee is because you're writing it to the Ethereum blockchain. Is that right?
Yeah, the fee is a network fee. It's necessary to play on the blockchain directly, right? So there will be an ETH fee with the transactions, and yep, that's why we're looking at like bridging to other layer 2 solutions, because on there you still have to pay gas fees, but they're essentially zero. Like no matter, like it's like really hard to get it even above a penny, right? Like on like Polygon. I think the only time it's been kind of high, like I think it was like a half of a cent. That's when it like got its highest, whenever like Iron Finance like crashed. And that was crazy. There's so much transaction volume during that time, and the fees on Polygon were still incredibly good relative to what was happening. So yeah, that's there's always the network fees on the blockchain. That's why we're looking at a lot of different options. We've got like, I think we've got like pretty much everything in mind. We're thinking about almost every concept and any problem that exists in blockchain. We're looking at ways we can solve it or work around it to make things work.
That's awesome. Do we have more questions?
Let's see. So someone says, can the governance eliminate your 5% theoretically? So no, that won't be possible. Because the fee is actually like outside the game. The 5% royalty I think they're referring to. That's more so located in the marketplaces. So that will be in a separate contract. That won't be able to be changed by governance. I suppose like if there was enough demand to do something like make it governable, that could be something that's possible. But traditionally, like, that's not something that's like a governance based thing. So let me see what else we got here. Will there ever be new buddies introduced? So that's a good question. So are there any plans to expand the game into other buddies? So it's a two-part question. It's a really good question. So I don't think that there will be new buddies added to MicroBuddies, right? So what I think is going to happen, and I have to say I think because we never know what's going to happen. Like it really is going to depend on the community. I don't think that we're going to add, I don't think that it will make sense to add more MicroBuddies, since it would like kind of like mess with the Gen 0 stuff and like kind of the provenance of it all, to add like another species on top. But what can happen, and what I would be much more excited for, is if we started doing more blockchain games or more games that utilize NFTs, that we work in MicroBuddies in different ways. And you can have like sister games with other species and stuff like that all interact together, and like you can integrate goo in different ways, and like there's opportunities to like put it in Minecraft and go crazy with it. And so that's kind of the way that we would more so like want to expand on the game than anything else, than like adding content directly to MicroBuddies, because we want them to stay collectible and rare, and we don't want to like dilute it in any way. So yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah. So what if two people swap buddies? Yeah, I like these questions. So what if two people swap buddies? No fee. Can it be done off blockchain? It can't be done off blockchain, but yes, in theory. So you can swap MicroBuddies off like the marketplaces on your own. Now, to do that, you have to trust the other person that they're not going to just scam you and take your MicroBuddy, or you have to develop a very complex smart contract to facilitate the transaction. So there are like technically ways to avoid like the 5% royalty if you really want to, if that's what you're talking about. Like if people could like circumvent that, but it's very risky. So like most of the time, it's going to be like, it's just 5%. So it's probably a worthwhile thing to do, to have like all the smart contract functionality that helps keep like your transactions safe with other people and trustless overall, because it's all done through code. So yeah, and again, like this is the entire NFT market, and we don't see any problems with this. So yeah, it is something I definitely thought about too. So it's a very good question.
So what about when people have more, like, because you can only have three Nano Factory tokens in a wallet. So we know some people out there are awesome, and they actually have more than, they have their three, each wallet has three in there. Well, can you move Nano Factory tokens into different wallets, or is the cap actually, is it only on the purchase, or can I actually move them into? So like I bought them for my daughter, right? So I'd like to be able to move them to her own wallet at some point,
of course,
without giving her my keys.
Yeah. So I've got something in the chat to address after this. This is a good question you have. So with the reason why we did this, making it where you can only buy 3 Nano Factory tokens per wallet, is kind of like just to kind of slow down big whales, like because the game does need to be, at least a bit decentralized, right? So like if one person with a lot of money came in and they were like, heck, I like these are 0.05 ETH each, like someone who bought like a million ETH way back in the day or something, they could just come in and buy up most of the supply and almost ruin the game in a way. So this is basically a throttle. So you can buy more than 3 Nano Factory tokens. You just need to go into your MetaMask and add an account, and then switch to that account. You'll have to send that account ETH to pay the price, and then buy 3 Nano Factory tokens on there. Or you could maybe like go to your wallet that has the 3 Nano Factory tokens in it and send it to a different wallet, and then buy 3 more with the same wallet. You can do either way like that. It just slows down the process and makes it a little bit too tedious for someone with just a bunch of big money to throw around, to like care to do that, right? So it helped, and it has worked very well. Like I think the game's already decentralized enough to be perfectly playable even at this point. Even if we like ended up burning the rest of the Nano Factory token supply, it would the game can live at this point, because we've already sold half the tokens, and we have a few hundred holders. I think overall we actually have hundreds of holders. So yeah, the game is perfectly easy to branch out. It just takes a few people to like just play it, start selling it to other people. Like as soon as someone who wants to propagate gets their hands on like a Gen 3, they can make a million Gen 4s and 5s and 6s and 7, and yeah, the game will work out like this. So it was a way to throttle whales, and I think we succeeded.
But can you move Nano Factory? Can a wallet hold more than 3 Nano Factory tokens once it's bought?
Yeah, so that's, yeah, okay. So what you can do, I think the best strategy if you do want to accumulate a lot, is actually not to create. I've seen a lot of people create a bunch of wallets and put 3 in each.
That's what
and so that's very understandable. But I think the best strategy is like you buy 3 with account number 1, we'll call it, and you send those 3 to account number 2, right? And you buy 3 more with account number 1, because now account number 1's empty, and then you send those new 3 to account number 2. Now you have 6 in account number 2, and that's perfectly fine, right? And so you can, and also that if you do accumulate more than 3, I don't want to say for certain that it would be better to have them all in the same wallet, but it would kind of be better to have them all in the same wallet, because if all of your MicroBuddies exist in the same wallet, you can claim all of their goo together in one Ethereum transaction. You don't have to keep paying like Ethereum transactions over and over, and you can do all the functions from there. And and there's been a lot of stuff in testing that I probably shouldn't like go too in depth in, but like we've seen like all kinds of scenarios in testing where like some MicroBuddies are so like bad, like once you've replicated them too much, like their goo production is so low, you just send it off to another wallet, or you can just kill it. You don't like it anymore, you don't want it, you send it off to another wallet so it doesn't increase your gas fee they have to pay when you're claiming on all of them. Yeah, there's just like all kinds of stuff because you end up getting a lot of MicroBuddies. You kill them for goo and stuff like that. So it's pretty fun, but never the Gen Zeros. You don't touch those.
You go do that question because then I have another question for you after
Yeah.
that.
Okay. Well, yeah, I just saw Mr. Sunshine said 5% is nothing, man. So I wanted to address that because yeah, it is a very simple thing, and on the surface it looks like it's not much. And I think I talked about it a little bit earlier, but we're talking about 5% of every transaction involving a MicroBuddy, right? So again, it's the resellability of a MicroBuddy. One MicroBuddy can be sold 10 times in a day. Like one, if the rarest MicroBuddy like changes hands multiple times a day, you're talking about 5% of the transaction volume, right? Look at the transaction volume of like one of the top cryptos or something, and imagine taking 5% of that. Like if there's only like 5 MicroBuddies trading and they're changing hands at like $100,000 each or something, like 100 times a day, that's a lot that adds up, even though it's just like a few MicroBuddies changing hands over and over. It's 5% of like a massive number. If you're getting like 5% of like a 10 million transaction volume, like even something like that's relatively modest for crypto, but like for a crypto game, 10 million in transaction volume, you're taking 5% of that daily. I mean, that's a lot of business revenue day over day.
Yeah.
Like that's like $500,000 a day in business revenue. And by the way, it's almost complete profit, at least for the most part, because it's not like a traditional game where you have like so many expenses that come with your money. Like you're getting straight 5%. So if you're talking about the like 5% being, I mean, it's a very simple concept, right? And we basically players get to keep everything because 5% can be so powerful with this business model. So much, in my opinion, it's way more powerful than games that use pay to win, right? Even, and pay to win is horribly unfair, and it's way more fair than games that like utilize free to play with like crates and stuff like that. So yeah, I think this is the perfect business model for video games. And yes, we're very early on in the technology. We're making simple games, but this is the beginning of like what can become very complex and like a whole new business model for video games. And that's literally why I'm doing this. Yeah, because the fairest and most profitable for everybody, including players, as long as they're good, right? So yeah.
I love it. Are there more questions? Otherwise, I have one question on the storyline because you said something that made me remember one of my questions from earlier.
Yeah. So one last thing. So John just asked if it's recorded. The answer is yes. So we're gonna upload it to YouTube. We had like a technical issue, like getting the stream live on YouTube, but I mean, we're still gonna upload the video to YouTube after the stream. So yeah.
Awesome. So remember when you said that evil, you're like, yeah, one of these MicroBuddies is just evil. I'm just going to ship it over there. This was something that Joseph told me. And it was like, at first I didn't quite get it the first few times he was telling me this, but like, I call them like, kind of like either Gremlins After Dark or purple minions, like the crazy ones. Right. But there's a storyline behind here that's even bigger than like, oh, aren't they cute? Or like, oh, so cute little things. So tell us more about that.
Yeah. Yeah. So officially, we don't talk about the story too much. We let the MicroBuddies kind of tell themselves. They're not what meets the eye. So basically, you can go to our website. You'll see MicroBuddies. They're cute, lovable NFT microbes. And the kind of like hint as to like what's really going on, because there might not be so cute and lovable, that I like to use is to look at on twitter.com/microbuddies or at microbuddies, our location. So we have a location, and you can like dig into some things if you Google that location about what microbuddies might actually be up to in the story, and learn more, and more will be revealed over time. And yeah, and also, by the way, that brings up a point about our trailer. Like some people were kind of like put off by it, and that was that was very much by design. The MicroBuddies are just weird. I like to say that like yeast and fungi were telling me they'd make a really great trailer, and it's just like this they're bumping into each other. They're not coordinated at all. What's going on? There's like,
They're so
so
naughty. They just do not cooperate.
yeah. um, so I think it's Rilo or Ronan. Rilo Ronan. He asked, can I go into detail with the activities that MicroBuddies can do? So yeah, I went very into detail about what MicroBuddies can do earlier in the stream. So whenever the video's up on our YouTube channel, that will have all that content you need. Essentially, there's just a lot of different things you can do with them. You can replicate, you can collect goo. Obviously, you can re-roll their traits, like the recessive traits to get better ones. You can lock in dominant traits that you don't want to like lose. You can kill off your microbuddy with apoptosis. You can provide liquidity to the goo token itself, and a few other things. So we went pretty in depth with that earlier.
No worries. And I'll get that up right away, Ronan. I'll work on getting this up right away tonight. Yeah. Right.
Yeah, agreed. So yeah, I think we're just taking questions now, right? So any questions we have, like before we kind of end it off, like we probably got a good like 10-20 minutes or something, would you say?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Yeah, okay, cool. So someone asked Beep asked Fluxty, will we be able to quit our jobs and just play MicroBuddies? I mean, that's the goal, right? Like I really want to make it where I want to facilitate the gamer dream of like being able to play games for a living, and this is something, I mean, it's really deep, right? I know it's like silly on the surface, but like outside of like the first world, like a lot of people are using crypto to like gain financial freedom from like really bad centralized systems that are like actually apparent. Like in the United States, things don't work the best, but they work okay, like where we can kind of live our lives decently well. But there's a lot of places in the world where that's not the case, and that's why Bitcoin and Ethereum and all of that have become such a big deal. And even dating all the way back to like whenever like MMOs had like black markets that you weren't even allowed to sell items in, like that I talked about earlier. There were people like I think it was like developing nations, not necessarily third world countries, but a lot of developing nations were responsible for making a lot of those like MMO, like video game item selling markets, multi-billion-dollar markets, because that was their only real source of revenue. Like it helped people like escape poverty, and that was against the rules. So it's definitely a really big point to make, to try to like make video games where people can like make a living from it, because I do think you can find purpose in life from playing video games and making it into your job. And I think traditionally it's very hard to do that. You have to be like a professional player, which is a very small percentage of people. So this enables like the whole world of gamers and people who dream about being able to make a living do that. And this is just the first step, right? MicroBuddies on serve a simple game, but that's a really deep thing. so yeah.
No, and on top of that, you're talking about the yield and the goo farming and things. So it's almost like it's an investment in some way. This is not legal financial or investment advice, obviously, but it's almost like there's a whole nother realm to it.
Yeah.
So that for gamers who want to monetize their talents. And I could see so many people going on Twitch and doing, hey, this is what I did with my microbuddy, and this is how I got this trait, and this is how I got this trait, and that's how I rolled that one back, right? Just kind of how we've got people, making like I said, Paul and Nick, some of our greatest fans, they're out there and they're showing like they're making content, they're showing, what could happen in the game and things. So because people are so excited and engaged, we're always looking for more user content, right? And that's really what drives a community. So I could definitely see people on Twitch or other social media channels doing tutorials on MicroBuddies and yield and goo.
Yeah.
That's my 2 cents.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
that is my 2 satoshis. Yeah, that's definitely something we definitely like really want to see, right? Just people getting involved in the game, and being able to, another big thing is like find success in MicroBuddies and be able to expand it right into more games and keep it kind of going in that way, right? Which we brushed on earlier. So I think we've got a lot of this. Let's see. Do we got another question here? So a community member wants to know what the timeline is for the public rollout. So So we've got a few things. I don't want to speak too soon on a lot of things. So the closed beta is going to determine a lot of this for us. An exact timeline. We're basically working in 4 phases of development. So we're doing the closed beta now, right? This is why we're increasing the price of the Nano Factory tokens, because we're working into a real tangible state where the game is in a full functionality place. Now we want to be able to be very careful in making sure the game is secure and that it's balanced in an appropriate way to where the supply of goo is going to be going to work as intended, and MicroBuddies are going to be valuable, and the game is fun and playable. So we're going to spend most likely 2 to 3 weeks, I think, on that, probably at most, like on the long end, perfecting that, and that will initiate basically phase 3, where the closed beta is complete and the game is ready for launch, and that will hopefully work us into the third and final price increase that we mentioned in our documentation, right, of the 0.15 ETH. So this is not the end for the price increase of the Nano Factory tokens. And then then after that, we'll have a very short defined window for probably, I mean, and like others, like Jenny, you can comment to this, but that'll probably be like our biggest step in marketing, because there was also a question about marketing once the game is fully ready for launch, leading up to the launch, getting a hype going, and like actually performing the launch at that point. So
Yes, exactly. I can't say it better. You did a great job.
yeah, so any plans for MicroBuddies to battle each other? No, not right now. However, like this is the interesting thing about the way we're making this game, is that we could make another game where you can literally use the same MicroBuddies NFTs and make them battle, or someone else could make a game where you battle with the MicroBuddies NFTs. Like there's a lot of different like possibilities that people can use, and I mean, obviously if there's enough demand for people wanting to like do something like make them battle, like turn it into like a kind of Pokemon thing, that is certainly possible, because you can just build on top of MicroBuddies. That's kind of how it's made, that anybody can like build their own use cases for MicroBuddies on top of it, right? So
That's so cool. That's so open source. It's so blockchain,
yeah.
the community gets to make all of
Yeah,
these.
and that's another beautiful thing about blockchain versus like traditional games, is that you can take the items of the video game, and like I can make another video game that says I'll accept your item into my game, right? Your item can be redeemable for a different item in my game, stuff like that. And so games can be like interoperable, right? If they're all on the same blockchain, even if they're on different blockchains, as long as there's a bridge. So
That's so cool. As a mom who has bought a lot of video game assets who are not
yeah,
interoperable at
imagine.
all.
Yeah, imagine like when your kid gets like sick, like because I would get sick of video games really quick, but I would spend like money on it. Imagine if you could take the items once you get tired of it and sell them, and then use it, like sell them or put them into a different game, like for a different item. You could just move to the next one with the same like money you spent before or something, right? I think that's kind of cool. Like that's a kind of cool opportunity. I think that'll become more apparent as the technology for Ethereum evolves, and it's like easier to connect. You don't have to like do all this like crazy stuff, and there's like more solutions for like like people who maybe like don't want to go through all the hassle of like setting up blockchain stuff. I think the technology is going to improve a lot. Like we're super early on, and like a lot of those scenarios are going to be really enabled, like interoperability with video games, and like especially like kids playing.
Yeah, for sure. We're like at the DOS phase right now.
Oh yeah, we're like, yeah, I always relate it to like the early internet, right? And it's very similar because well, if you look around, like people with the early internet, like you had like governments saying it's a problem, like the rise of cybercrime, it's only for criminals. Like it was so similar, like in a lot of ways. And then you had like the dot-com boom, where like it was way too early on for the internet, but like it went up in value and then it crashed, and here it is now taking like transforming the whole world. And blockchain looks almost identical in its like trajectory. It's like and it makes sense, because the internet's the transfer of information that I was talking about, and the blockchain is the store, or the transfer of value. So yeah. And then another question from one of our Minecraft players says, "So Skyblock summer soon?" And I put a little emoji. But
Ooh.
yeah, we're still working on Minecraft stuff, of course. And again, like MicroBuddies, I just want to make that point that like MicroBuddies helps with all of our Minecraft stuff, because it's a big opportunity for us, and it's increased our budgets around the all around. So we're gonna hopefully be able to do like really cool things, and like with Minecraft, because I know all of our Minecraft players have been waiting for a while because we've been so focused on MicroBuddies, but there's going to be a lot more resources, hopefully. That's kind of the plan. And there's even like opportunities that we can do some stuff with NFTs in Minecraft, because we have a lot of like resources on Engine, and Engine's
Mhm.
tightly connected to the NFT space. Like they're one of the biggest players in the NFT space. So it's a really interesting opportunity that we also have that like is a whole nother thing to explore. So yeah, um, just going through the questions here. So says, I'm sure you answered this, but can you sell a token or only buddies? So Beep, um, you could technically sell a Nano Factory token, but it would be very difficult because there's not really any liquidity for it. So the reason why we did that is so that people don't hoard the Nano Factory tokens and they actually make MicroBuddies, right? So that's why we made the Nano Factory tokens in the way we did. We almost considered like a more greedy approach of like making the Nano Factory tokens into like non-fungible tokens, and then people could sell that and then we could take the royalty. But there was an extreme concern that people would just never sell the Nano Factory tokens, because like what's better than a MicroBuddy, a Gen 0 MicroBuddy, than a Nano Factory token that's a non-fungible token, right? Like that can be turned into a Gen 0. So we made it like basically that you can't really trade them like in any practical way, to avoid that concern. So going through here, will Goo be able to be used as the good gaming currency throughout all of its platforms? It is possible to do that, yes. Will it be able to be used on the Minecraft? So I actually just talked about this a little bit. So will it be able to be used on the Minecraft servers or other future endeavors? Yes, it will absolutely be able to be. We're gonna like monitor very closely. Like we want to make sure that everything makes sense to do, because like there's a lot of like supply mechanics with Goo that have to be a certain, kind of like a certain standard for MicroBuddies. But generally, yeah, like featuring Goo in other games and stuff like that will work perfectly fine and just give Goo more value. So as long as it makes sense to do it, absolutely, we're gonna look at every single opportunity to do that in future, and with Minecraft and anything where it makes sense and players would actually enjoy it, right? Because one thing I don't want to do is like burden like people with like if the Minecraft players are just sick of it or something, I don't want to give them like Goo. I want to integrate it in a fair way that doesn't just like throw it in the game, like that makes it make sense in the game. So yeah.
That's so cool.
Yep. And I think that's
We're good.
yeah, I think I've gone through all the questions here in the chat. If there's anything I missed, please ask. Uh, can I send a token from MetaMask to my grandson? Of course you can, but if your grandson has a wallet as well, you can send it.
Might be best to set up your grandson's wallet and then send it over to him, but then transfer it and then send it over to him. That's what I ended up doing with my daughter. Oh, when we were talking about all those different wallets, and the other thing is you got to keep all those keys separate and know which wallet goes with which key. So that's
Well,
why I
yeah.
really like your solution.
Yeah, for sure. If you have separate wallets, you have a bunch of different private keys to keep track of. But in MetaMask, you can make as many accounts as you want, which are essentially just more wallets that are all attached to the same key. So yeah, exactly like you said. I just kind of reiterated.
It's totally cool.
Yeah. I don't see any other questions. I think we're good. I think
And on the social is pretty easy. It's at MicroBuddies, and the Discord is where all of the cool stuff is happening. So you definitely want to check that out. We have all social channels. We've got Twitter and Reddit. There's even an investors, like an investors roundtable that two of our investors began, and they're working and putting content up. We're always looking for new user generated content. It's really exciting to watch everyone's whether it's their tweets or their thoughts on the stock or their thoughts on MicroBuddies or their thoughts on blockchain. So that's why I love blockchain. I don't know about you, Adam.
yeah.
I love it because it's so interactive.
Of course, yeah. So I mean, that's kind of what we've been talking about, right? It's community centric, and that's why games work so well on it. So yeah, thank you everybody for checking out and listening to me talk about MicroBuddies, and I hope I helped answer all your guys' questions. When as soon as our documentation for the game like gets its full legal review, we're gonna put it out there, and you guys can like dive into like exact math. Anybody who's like a nerd about it and wants to like really dig in, and like we can do more questions after that. So
Love it. Awesome.
Yep.
We're good.
Yep, we're good. That's it.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for joining us. And next time we'll have like some of the tech stuff figured out. It's been some of the streams, but I'm so glad that we got Twitch all working and everything. And so look for the video later on. And then Fluxty, it's Fluxty on Twitter, and follow MicroBuddies, and we'll talk to you later. Sound good? Okay. Have a great night.
Bye, everybody.